Since we just launched our new segment yesterday, I figured we keep it going with another edition of The Seattle Times is Trash. Okay, so the Seattle Times put out an article that is absolutely laughable as it pertains to Trump's Medicaid cuts. The headline, "While homeless patients have a lot to lose under Trump's Medicaid changes." Even before I read it, while homeless patients are losing a lot right now, mostly their lives. And you guys don't seem as fired up about that. So angry about something Trump's doing to the homeless, but not angry about, I don't know, the 15 years of a worsening homeless crisis under Democrats. So just the story selection in and of itself shows why the Seattle Times is trash. But let's read it, shall we? Another sob story from the Seattle Times. For years, I feel like I need some sort of like, next time, some sort of like violin music, right? For their sob story writing. For years, Nicole, not our Nicole, lived with the kind of pain that would stop her in her tracks. Lightning bolts would shoot down her leg. So painful it would bring her to her knees. She's fallen many times because of it. Eventually, she told her employer she couldn't keep working until she could undergo surgery to fix the degenerative discs in her back, causing this chaos. But the 55-year-old is on Medicaid and had difficulty scheduling the surgery with anyone who will accept the federally subsidized health care. After 9 months of waiting, her employer told her they could no longer hold her job. "I couldn't pay the bills," she said. Okay, and that's sad. Like anybody who's hurt and can't work, like I feel bad for Nicole at this point. With 2 surgeries completed and at least 2 more to go, Nicole is sleeping in the back seat of her broken down Buick and facing a new hurdle to get back on her feet. She asked to be referred to only with her first name because she's worried the stigma of her health and homelessness will hurt her job hunt. She said Congress passed a spending and tax bill in July that requires Medicaid recipients ages 19 to 64 served under the Affordable Care Act's expansion to work, study, or volunteer at least 80 hours a month to maintain their coverage starting January 2027. Or they'll have to prove again and again they have a qualifying condition that exempts them from work requirements. Okay, let this sink in for a second. So you've got this woman, if we're to believe her story, that she's, because the Seattle Times is obviously going to believe it just without any proof whatsoever, but she says she got hurt, lost her job, sleeping in the backseat of her car, and she's got these surgeries and she needs it paid for with the Affordable Care Acts and the requirements therein. So Republicans in Congress, of course, and there's all these freak out from Democrats about Trump's changes to Medicaid. But if it was just that first sentence where it said Congress passed a spending bill in July that requires Medicaid recipients ages 19 to 64 to work, study, or volunteer at least 80 hours a month to maintain their coverage starting January 27th, then I'd feel bad for Nicole. Like, well, what do you mean? She can't work, study, or volunteer if her condition is that bad, so you're just going to take away her Medicaid coverage? No, that last sentence is critical. Or if you can't do that, if you can't prove that you can work, study, or volunteer at least 8 hours a week, you have to prove you have a qualifying condition that exempts you from work requirements. So what's the problem? What's the problem? She doesn't have to lose it. She just has to prove that she has a qualifying condition. And if she's telling the truth about the severity of her injury, then she can very easily prove that she has a qualifying condition and there's no issue whatsoever. The Seattle Times goes on to say, anywhere from 200,000 to 320,000 out of the nearly 2 million Washingtonians on Medicaid could lose their coverage due to the upcoming changes. Weird. Within 2 years, we will probably skyrocket to most of our patients being uninsured, said Barbara DePietro, Senior Director of Policy for the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. Wait. That doesn't make any sense. So you're saying within 2 years, most of your patients will probably be uninsured. Okay, but the only way they lose their insurance is if they either weren't working, studying, or volunteering at least 80 hours a week, or they couldn't prove they had any reason not to. So what you're telling me, what you're tattling on all of them. What you're admitting and the Seattle Times somehow doesn't recognize this, is that most of our patients probably don't qualify for this benefit and could be working, but just aren't? 200,000 to 320,000 people? That right there is proof why the changes were necessary. Because if you're really saying that most of your homeless patients who benefit from this would lose it, what you're saying is they can't prove that they have a valid reason to receive it. And do you think the Seattle Times thought to maybe, hey, call that out? What's the big deal if you have to prove that you have an actual qualifying condition? And then here's the one thing they say will be hard for the homeless. Under the new law, states will be required to regularly obtain all enrollees' addresses to prevent people from being enrolled in multiple states. Doing so could disproportionately impact homeless recipients. She says, how do you verify an address for people who don't have one? The same way you verify their address so they can vote. Homeless people in our state, we've talked about it for years. You have to have an address to get a ballot. Where do they send it to? 777 South Washington is a very popular address. They send it to the areas, the facilities, DESC, to the homeless shelters. They send thousands of them out to homeless people so they can vote. So you're saying, Democrats, that you have an address for them to be able to vote, but you don't have an address for them to be able to verify their Medicaid that they so desperately need. It's like life or death. Put their address at the homeless shelter, the same address that you use so they can get a ballot in the mail. And if you have homeless individuals also having to have an address, right? This is a benefit for them because it will tie them to a place where they hopefully are getting services. You know what? To this woman who, if the only thing is an injury, which I just don't believe, because we have so much shelter space available for homeless people in this state and apartments and all these things, and you're saying she doesn't have any substance abuse or mental health issues, she just has an injury that she's nursing back to health, and that's the only reason she doesn't have a job? I could find her a shelter in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Andrea Suarez, if that's really the only issue, you tell us, and Andrea Suarez can have her a shelter in 5 minutes. Of course, that's not the problem. But if that's the case and she says, look, I need these surgeries, so maybe I can't be living in my car and I've got to actually plug into the system. I've got to plug into the system so I have an address that I can use for my Medicaid confirmation, because this is life or death for me. But she doesn't want to do that. Why? Why, Seattle Times? Have you asked yourselves that? Have you asked yourselves that simple question before you reported on the story? No, you haven't. Why haven't they, Nicole? Because
it's trash.
Then you're supposed to play the sounder. Why haven't they, Nicole?
Oh, sorry.